What's going on, Husker Nation? Welcome into week 2 of spring football in Nebraska. We're talking football in March. Can you believe it? We talk it year-round here on Nebraska at the Voice of College Football. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like our videos, comment down below your thoughts as we progress through our video today. Now, defensive coordinator John Butler met with the media as well as a couple of players, and we're going to dive into some of the comments that they made today that I found very interesting. The main thing, we'll start off the top here. John Butler said Nebraska is focusing on 3 things on the defensive side of the ball: execution, finishing, and forcing turnovers. Pretty vanilla answer. But the one thing that I found interesting about it was he's actually charting players and how they finish plays, how they make finishing plays or game-changing plays. They are now charting that to kind of evaluate and measure players on their ability to make a play in a critical moment. And those players, John Butler said, elevate up the depth chart or they fall down depending on their performance. When it comes to finishing, we know Nebraska, and we can think back to last year or really the last handful of years. Like, I'm not talking about 2 or 3, like 4 or 5, 6, 7 years at Nebraska, where the defense has had to make a play to win a game. A defense has had to make a stop to win a game. It's been a big third down, and then they just constantly give up that third down or they don't make that play. I'm glad they found a way to measure. They may have done this before, but it's the first I've heard about it. I'm glad they found a way to measure players who make finishing plays or make game-changing plays. John Butler was asked about Phil Snow today, too. Kind of what is Phil Snow's role as the associate head coach, with obviously the primary focus being on the black shirts? Well, Coach Butler said that Phil Snow is a great confidant. He has an awesome relationship with him. He uses his, as John Butler said, 100 years of coaching experience to talk football, to talk philosophy, to really pick his brain and use his experience to better the black shirts. He said that's their only goal. Their number one goal: make the black shirts better. And this isn't Coach Butler's first time in a situation where he's had this associate head coach, or basically someone who is higher up on the pecking order by title that's overseeing the defense. He mentioned when he was down at the Houston Texans, where Romeo Crennel was the defensive coordinator and eventually moved into a very similar role that Phil Snow is currently in right now. It's not his first time doing it. You just got to blend your ideas, blend your concepts together, and figure out what do we need to do to make the black shirts better. He said there's been really good competition each day through 5 or 6 practices so far. Been really good competition in the secondary. He thinks that room has improved a lot. He's really encouraged with that defensive back room. Now, we know there were struggles last season in the defensive back room. I think a lot of that has to do with conflicting, it's not schemes, but maybe conflicting coverage philosophies, which we've talked about on the channel before. I think a lot of it had to do with Tony White wanted to do it a certain way, and he's the defensive coordinator. So at the end of the day, how he wants to run his defense is how he wants to run his defense. And John Butler maybe didn't totally agree with that. That's my understanding, is a little bit kind of what happened. I think they're going to change a lot in that secondary room. He talked about getting DeShaun Singleton and Javin Wright back, which is huge. And we're going to talk about Javin Wright and DeShaun Singleton. They were 2 of the players that met with the media today. He said getting them back, he compared it to like free agency, where you think they're leaving, they had opportunities to go to the NFL, but they eventually came back. And he said that's a testament to what Coach Rule is building at Nebraska. DeShaun Singleton last year, was just a safety. And we've been hearing, and I've been telling you and Justin as well, that they're going to be moving him around because he has a unique skill set where he's big. He's 6'3", 6'4", 210, 215, but he can run. He can do a lot of different things. He can play down in the box. He can cover as well. He said that they are, in fact, using DeShaun Singleton at multiple different positions. And I think, and we'll get to it when we talk about DeShaun's comments at the press conference today. I think what they mean by multiple positions is there's still a safety. It's just there's multiple different safety positions on this defense. And so that's kind of what I think, that's what I'm interpreting that as, is he's still a safety. They're just using him in different safety positions. Coach Butler said last year was a big learning point for him, that you're in college, because he hasn't been in college in quite a while since his time at Penn State when Bill O'Brien was the head coach. And then he went to the Texans and then at the Buffalo Bills. It's been, a decade plus since he's been in college. So he said a big learning point for him was that in college, you're really training players as opposed to the NFL, where you're really more developing. The NFL guys know the schematics. They know their responsibilities. They know where to be more times than not. So you're more training college players, and you just need more experience, more exposure to situations, to what they're going to see. That is how you develop them. He was asked about advancing their third down defense. We saw a lot of issues under Tony White on third downs, especially late in games. He mentioned, it's a process this is spring ball. We're in beginning of week 2. It's a process. Right now, the first week, they're focusing on first and second down defense, their base fundamentals for basically we call it phase 1 or week 1 of spring ball. This week, they just started to introduce their third down defense and their 2-minute drill defense. He mentioned leaning on guys with experience. This is a whole new defensive coaching staff, really, outside of Rob Dvorak and John Butler, I guess, to an extent, but he's still new-ish. He's only been here for about 10 months when you think about it. He didn't come in as a defensive backs coach until June or July? I think it was July. Yeah, it was July 5th when Evan Cooper was terminated, or not terminated, but told you're not going to be here anymore. So he got here late July. So he hasn't even been here that long. So he still is a newer guy. But he mentioned leaning on guys like, you mentioned Terry Braden and him coaching on the Chiefs and under Steve Spagnuolo, how they had an elite third down defense, leaning on guys like Phil Snow, who've been coaching football for 100 years. There's all sorts of experience in that defensive coaching staff that they can lean on to make sure that the problems that have been happening on third down don't continue to be a problem. The goal on third down, you have to affect the quarterback. That's basically the biggest thing. That's the guy making the decision with the ball, whether he's throwing it or checking to a run or scrambling for for a first down or whatever. You have to affect the quarterback, whether that be through your coverage, whether that be through your rush. But you have to be multiple enough to not be predictable, but also not be so multiple that you screw up. So there is a balancing act there between being multiple to screw up the timing of the quarterback or affecting the quarterback, while also being multiple enough so that your defense understands their job assignment. The big thing is just affecting the offensive operation too, whether that be, again, through your coverage or through your rush. He talked a little bit about defensive lineman, defensive tackle Elijah Judy. He said that he had a really good spring so far. Again, we're 5 practices in. It's spring ball. It's really early. They're on their 3rd practice with pads. So there's not a lot to go off of right now, but we're just kind of going over what we hear from the coaching staff. He mentioned, there's a lot of players that left. Yes, but we have good players there. The coaches are going to get them to where they need to be. And then Elijah Judy, who we just talked about, came up to the mic. He said he got bigger during winter conditioning. He's up to 298 pounds so far. He'll probably be a little bit bigger come fall, but he mentioned when he first came to Nebraska, he was in that 270-pound range. And now he's in that 298, which helps him be more comfortable stopping the run and being able to rush the passer. At 270 pounds, when he was at that playing weight, he said it was a lot easier to rush the passer. But as a defensive tackle in the Big Ten, you're going to need to be a little bit bigger. You need to be able to stop the run and rush the passer a little bit. On coming back, too, he was asked, early December, you said you're coming back. I found this very interesting. I didn't really know it was like a debate or a thought that Elijah Judy wasn't coming back, but apparently it was. Apparently, Elijah Judy said, I wasn't sure if I was playing football next season. He thought he was done playing football. But then he decided to, talk with his family. It's one more year. Let's take advantage of it. I thought that was really a big, because can you imagine right now if Elijah decided to step away from football, what this interior defensive line would be for Nebraska after everything you just lost with Nash and Ty? You would have very limited options right now on the defensive line. He mentioned Coach Terry Braden as well. He said he's a high energy coach. He has great relationships with the defensive line room. He actually went down to Kansas City. He met with Terry Braden after he was hired. He met with his family, as well as when he, officially took the job, he met with him as well. And Coach Butler said he's high energy. He's got some swag to him, and he wants the defense to play with some swagger. Do you a little dance after a sack or you make a big play. Let your personality show on the football field. A lot of guys are taking advantage of the opportunities in front of them in the defensive line room. He even said it himself. There is no secured spot on the defensive line. Everyone is fighting. And then he also commented about being kind of the older guy in the room. He said he's had to adapt to being that older guy in the room. There's a lot of new faces in that room. He's been working on keeping guys motivated, words of encouragement. He said everybody leads differently. Ty was a very loud and vocal leader. Nash was more of a lead by example, the Papa Bear, as he labeled him, the Papa Bear of the group. He said both those guys taught him that each person is different on how you lead. Some guys are going to react poorly to being a very vocal leader. Some guys will react positively to that. So he's learned to be able to tailor his leadership style to the person that he's working with in that defensive line room. So that's really, really important, because as someone that has managed people for many, many years, I can tell you everyone is different and everyone reacts differently. So being able to be adaptable as a leader is huge. And then that was the end of the Elijah Judy interview. DeShaun Singleton came to the mic next. He talked about coming back. He didn't really think he had that opportunity. And then we got the JUCO ruling that really helped him kind of make that decision. I recall, was it 2 years ago? Yeah, it was 2 years ago sorry, I have a brain fart, but I believe it was 2 years ago. He played in 4 games and played 1 snap of the 5th game. It was against Michigan. And in that 1 snap in the 5th game, he blew his knee out. And the NCAA, because they are stupid, because they are completely inept, denied him his redshirt waiver, because you get 4 games to play in as a redshirt. Well, that 5th game that he played 1 snap in, the NCAA counted that as 5 games, even though, let's be real, it wasn't. It was a stupid ruling by the NCAA. But the JUCO ruling now gave him that year back. So patience paid off. Eventually, the NCAA did something right, which is very rare. But when that ruling came down, he talked to his family. He's like, yeah, I'm coming back, which is huge for Nebraska's secondary. That extra year of eligibility for DeShaun, he could have gone to the NFL, certainly. Probably would have been like a day 3 pick, 6th, 7th round. Potentially an undrafted free agent, but also we don't know entirely, because he never put his name really into the pre-draft analysis where they give you your grade, and he didn't do the combine or anything like that. But he probably would have been drafted. At least this year now, he's going to get to show more production, more film to NFL teams, and that's going to only help his draft stock while also benefiting our beloved Huskers. He knows, he talked a little bit too about John Butler being the defensive coordinator. He said he knows the expectations that John Butler has because he was his DB coach last year. So it's helped make that transition from him being the DB coach to now being the defensive coordinator a lot easier. He said Butler helped a lot with his understanding of the game. He helped a lot with building his confidence to becoming a great player. He talked about new defensive backs coach Addison Williams, that he brings a level of knowledge and technique to the room that is extremely beneficial. He said he's moving around on defense. They're just putting him in the best position to be successful with his skill set. He said he loves playing safety, which is where he's playing. It's just different types of safety, like I said a little bit earlier. The big difference is there might be some packages where he's more on the line of scrimmage, or that he's covering an over route or something like that. But a lot of it's going to be just different types of safety positions. It's not like, I think they're getting rid of the rover, honestly. I think that's what's happening. So, but it'll be just different types of safety positions, because he's got so much position versatility. He talked a little bit about going against Nebraska's wide receivers. He said they give us different looks. They're all different receivers. You've got finesse receivers. You got big bodied receivers. You have speed receivers like Barney or Mills. There's just a lot of variety in that wide receiver room. And he did get asked too about the new coaches. And I loved his answer. New coaches, same standard. Know what you're doing, do it with effort, play hard. That was it. And that was how he pretty much ended his interview, which I thought was awesome. Same standard, new coaches, loved it. And then Javin Wright, this was a phenomenal interview. I just absolutely love Javin Wright. I would personally suggest you go watch his part of the interview because it was absolutely phenomenal. He's such a good dude. He's been through so much in his career. He said it's been an amazing offseason. He finally got fully cleared. He feels like a normal player this year. He's able to practice unlike he was last year. And he said he's approaching practice like an art. Last year changed his perspective completely. He could play, just couldn't practice. It was the most unheard of thing that happened to a player. And he's had a lot of blood clot issues. So to finally get fully cleared again, hopefully there's no more blood clot issues for Javin because he's such a tremendous kid with a really bright future. He mentioned being the older guy. He's been here 7 years. So he mentioned being the older guy. You get a lot of wisdom to share with the younger guys. There's a lot of, with Javin, it's really like him, Marquise, and DeShaun in that room at linebacker and / the jack position. And that's like it for your older guys. There's so much young talent in that room. And with him being here for 7 years, he's seen both sides of college football. We'll get to that here in a minute. Actually, no, we'll just do it now. Why not? He mentioned like when he first came to Nebraska in 2019, he said he's like the bridge between two worlds. He's been through all the changes with the transfer portal, with NIL, the first stages of NIL 2, into the current stages of NIL 2. Think back to when NIL first came into play. It was like, remember Jeff Sims' deal, even just, was that 2 years ago? Yeah. It was like a meal deal at a restaurant, or like, come sign autographs for an hour and we'll give you $500. And now it's completely unhinged. Unbelievable that, he's got just great perspective for these younger kids that are like, you see what happens at Georgia. But for these younger kids where he's like, yeah, man, when I was here, like I had to ride a scooter to practice or to classes. I had to budget extensively because I was so broke. Like they only got like a stipend of like $1,300 a month. Now those guys are probably making that in 2 or 3 days with their NIL for some of them. So he's got unique perspective for these younger kids that are coming up through the ranks, have been a part of NIL really their entire time. But he also talked about too, wanting to come back. Like he knew he wanted to come back for his 7th year. He's the first 7th year player in Nebraska football history. But he knew that he wanted to come back at the end of the season. He was like 80% sure he was coming back. But he just didn't want to focus on that until the season was over. And once the season was over, Coach Rule came to him and was like, let's submit this waiver. Yep, let's do it. And boom, the NCAA approved it pretty quickly. Again, the NCAA finally did something right. Not very often they do, but for Javin's case and DeShaun Singleton's case, they did something right. And then in terms of his defensive fit, he said you can plug him anywhere. He can be your jack linebacker, your field linebacker, your boundary linebacker. He can be solo in the box. It's just really for him, it's about getting reps now because he missed all of last season. He has a unique skill set again, just like DeShaun, except he's bigger. He's 6'5". He's 240 pounds, fast. He can cover. He can play the edge. He can play in the box. Very unique skill set. And then we'll end it off here. This is the best quote of the entire day. He was asked about overcoming his blood clots. And we're going to leave it at this. He said, his route might be a little different, but his goal since he was 6 years old was to be in the NFL. And I quote, if that means risking my life to play the game, I will do that.